They tried Jim Jordan. They tried Tom Emmer. They tried a bunch of other people. And they ultimately looked, I guess, at the bottom of the barrel, and they got Mike Johnson. If it's not Mike Johnson, who's in charge?
Yeah.
Welcome back to The Fly-In. I'm Greg Landsman.
Marc Veasey.
We are doing this at the end of the week to recap what has been a dumpster fire of a week in the United States Congress. Let Chip Roy and others describe it. Chip Roy said, "This is a shit show." Another Republican member says, "This is fucked." Another Republican member said, "If we lose the majority now, it'd be a blessing in disguise." So here's essentially what happened. The speaker had a ton of things that he needed to get passed, that the country needed. One is he's got to end this DHS shutdown. And there is a Senate bill that passed unanimously that we would pass overwhelmingly. He's got to bring it to the floor, but he can't get it to the floor. He's got this reconciliation bill, which would give ICE and CPB another $75 billion when they're sitting on $100 billion, which is insane. They had to get a farm bill done. They had promised farmers that they were going to do this E15 bill, which they desperately need, and people who are paying higher at the pump desperately need. FISA, which is the most significant national security bill, and then they added some ridiculous trans bill, and then the wheels came off.
Yeah, the wheels came off. And, your terminology, dumpster fire, is absolutely right. And one of the reasons why it is such a dumpster fire, of course, is that the speaker just absolutely has no courage. Like he has no courage. He has no balls. All he does is take direction from the executive branch. He takes his marching orders from Trump, and you just can't lead that way. I'll never forget a quote from Nancy Pelosi when they were having all the turmoil, and they went from Kevin McCarthy and then ended up where we are today. And she said, if you have to give up all of your power to get the gavel, then it's not worth having.
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah. I mean, he's got two issues. One is Trump, and he'll do whatever Trump tells him to do, but only if that is reconcilable with the far right, right? These 10, 12 MAGA extremists who hold up the House, the proceedings all the time. And the White House is saying, go ahead, get the DHS deal done, because I've convinced Republicans to give ICE and CPB another $75 billion, which is insane.
Yeah, it is.
And he can't get the DHS funding bill on the floor because of these right wingers, the Freedom Caucus folks. And then, the farm bill and the E15 thing was an absolute mess. Yeah. This is what he told. He told a group of Republicans and us, we'll do E15, make it permanent so that people can get lower gas prices and farmers get to, be able to sell more and more of this, which is a good deal. And then he told the Freedom Caucus, don't worry, I'm not going to give them a vote.
Yeah.
And then it fell apart. The farm bill passed barely. The Senate's obviously going to have to rework the entire thing. And the FISA thing to me is incredible because they're messing with national security. I mean, from FISA, it's just something like, 65% of the intelligence in the president's morning briefing comes from FISA.
That's right. And
they have just been absolutely all over the place. Yeah. And whatever they pass will not pass the Senate. So the Senate right now is over there trying to get a FISA bill done, because it's about to expire, and the carriers are saying, we're not going to provide you with data. You get no more intelligence. Yeah. And so Thune is trying to fix this, and we're all just sitting here waiting for Thune to send back a bill. Yeah. And, not that this is a big deal, it demonstrates what a mess this is. Everyone was supposed to fly out today and go back to their districts and go back to work in their districts. Yeah. No one is leaving because the House absolutely dropped the ball on FISA and all these other things, and we can't leave until we get something back from the Senate. So we may be here for days. We don't know. Yeah.
People see Trump and they blame Trump, and they should, because he's the main culprit in all of this dysfunction. There's absolutely no question about that. But I also, want to remind people too that, again, this speaker just has, zero leadership skills. He should never have empowered the crazies within his caucus.
He does it every day. I mean, by agreeing to all whatever.
Putting them on rules, right?
Put them on rules.
By letting them basically control the rules committee. He took the worst elements of his caucus and he gave them a bunch of power. These are the people that he has empowered within his caucus. It is exactly the type of leadership that the American public doesn't want. It's the thing that the American public are sick and tired of. And he's empowered them.
Republican senators, including Thune, are sick and tired of this. I mean, they're so mad, and you can see from members, they won't give their names, but they're saying, like, if we lose the majority now, it would be a good thing, meaning the country cannot have us in the driver's seat any longer.
Right.
National security is a mess because they can't get this FISA bill done. They were going to, by the way, in the middle of the DHS shutdown, they were going to spend a good chunk of the week on a trans bill, saying to schools, if we don't like your bathroom policy, you're going to lose your money.
Yeah.
If a teacher doesn't, if a kid says, look, my name is Robert, but I want to be called Bobby.
Yeah, they have to get a permission.
They got to get the teacher crazy. Has to then call a parent and not talk about the educational achievements of their kids or what the kid needs educationally, but getting permission to call him Bobby. My son is Elijah. If he goes to school tomorrow and he was like, hey, I want to be called Eli, I don't want to call from the school. But this is what they were going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it really is. It's so maddening if you're up here, obviously, because you're just sitting around waiting to actually work, and they can't get their act together to put meaningful bills on the floor.
And I can't emphasize enough, when Johnson looks back at his legacy, and when the American public is judging him based on his legacy as speaker, and this will probably be his last term as speaker. I think that everyone understands
but that. He was the bottom of the barrel. I mean, this is the problem with the Republican conference.
Yeah.
He was the bottom. And he even said, I think he said, I'm the bottom of the barrel. I mean, they went through, days and days of debate. Yeah. They tried Jim Jordan. They tried Tom Emmer. They tried a bunch of other people. And they ultimately looked, I guess, at the bottom of the barrel, and they got Mike Johnson. If it's not Mike Johnson, who's in charge?
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see who they pick as their minority leader next year. If they go with Jim Jordan, which everybody expects, if they kind of go with a wild card and maybe pick someone that, that no one's really talking about, but they're obviously going to go a different direction. And I think that
you think they'll give up on him? Even though Trump, loves this guy.
Yeah, no, I think he's done. I think he's absolutely done.
I'm not entirely convinced he goes because Trump loves him so much.
He may not.
Although Jim Jordan's,
I think that when they lose the majority, they're going to blame them. I mean, when you're the leader, your people are going to blame you when you lose the majority, and he will take the blame. He will shoulder responsibility for losing the majority. He's not going to blame it on Trump. And you know how Trump is. When Trump sees that the Republicans have lost the majority, who is he going to blame? Trump is not going to take responsibility himself. He'll put a knife in the back of Johnson's back as fast as he can.
Let's get into the Supreme Court's decision on voting rights. You were elected in 2012. So you were here when the Supreme Court, messed with the voting rights bill the last time. They gutted it in 2013,
That's right.
Clearing the way for massive voter suppression.
Yeah.
And now they are clearing the way for states to get rid of the work to create districts that support, that take into account race, right, and this could be obviously a blow to Democrats, but the larger issue is you had an entire movement, one of the greatest, most inspiring, important movements in the history of the United States, the civil rights movement. They get the 1965 the Civil Rights Voting Rights Bill done. It's a transformational bill, and this court has torn it apart, completely apart.
They've completely torn it apart. And it's important to understand the history of who's on the court now and how they've always felt about VRA. Obviously, when VRA was initially passed,
the Voting
Rights Act was initially passed. Obviously, Alito and Roberts were both still at home. They were still kids in high school when this legislation passed. But when they were baby lawyers, they hated the Voting Rights Act. And you heard Alito make reference to, well, now that the country has gotten better. That's bullshit when he says that. Alito especially, has always hated the Voting Rights Act, any sort of civil rights initiatives. He and Roberts have always been against them. You can go back and look at the archives from the Reagan administration where they both worked and the other lawyers that they worked with. There was one lawyer that they both worked with. I don't remember his name. That was a part of the administration. And there was a discrimination case that the Reagan administration decided that no, we need to just kind of back away from this. The politics are bad. And the lawyer actually went to his office and cried because anything that he thought helped Black people, he wanted to take on. And he went to his office and cried. These are the type of people that have helped shape the minds of John Roberts and Samuel Alito. And so I'm not surprised. You think about the hostility before that time. You think about Rehnquist, right? And I believe that Roberts took Rehnquist's place, if I'm not mistaken. Rehnquist, when he was Supreme Court Justice, he actually had crocodile tears and was fake crying about voter suppression that he was accused of. I believe it was in Arizona, where he actually scared Black and Latinos away from polling locations to try to suppress the vote.
That's crazy.
And so,
I mean, it's believable, but it's just absolutely insane.
There's a long history of these conservative jurists.
I just think that's, by the way, it's like it's racist and a bit terrible, but it's also un-American. Like, as an American, like, I think of one of our core values is democracy and voting and protecting that. It's sacrosanct. I don't understand, these attempts. I mean, I do. It's all about power.
It's all about power.
But it's as an American, it's so offensive. Can I read from Justice Kagan as part of the dissent? Quote, under the court's new view of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, a state can, without legal consequence, systematically dilute minority citizens' voting power, meaning that they can take a group of minority voters, communities of color, and they can dilute and will most likely dilute their power. And there are no legal consequences now.
Zero legal consequences.
That's why we passed the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Bill in the first place.
That's right. Zero legal consequences. And I'm going to let everybody know just how bad this is going to be, particularly for Black and Latino voters in states like Texas and other parts of the South. So when Section 5 went away, all of a sudden, anything that Republicans in Texas thought benefited Black voters more than conservative white voters, they all of a sudden decided that we're going to get rid of that. The perfect case in point is vote by mail. Republicans dominated vote by mail, probably still do dominate vote by mail, but vote by mail got a bad reputation, almost like Birth of a Nation, if you're familiar with that racist movie, almost like Birth of a Nation, voter fraud type alarms that were sent amongst Republican constituents around the country. And so what ended up happening is that now, all of a sudden in Texas, in order to be able to vote by mail, the burden is much more higher. The voter ID bill that we passed that says you can only use a few forms of ID. We already had a voter ID system. We didn't need to just narrow it down to just a few forms of ID. Drop boxes in Houston, people could take their vote by mail ballot and they could go and drop it off at a location that was secured and vote that way. The Republicans said, too many Black people in Houston and too many Latinos in Houston were using the drop boxes, so we need to get rid of it. And so anytime something benefits someone Black or brown, all of a sudden it's voter fraud. It hurts conservative whites. We need to get rid of it. It's bad. So when they got rid of Section 5, that's what happened. So now this is like the final hammer. With Section 2, people are just going to say, there's a Black and brown community right there. We're going to dilute that community and split it up into a bunch of different pieces, but not because they're Black and brown, even though that's why they're doing it. We're going to dilute them into 1950 little pieces or make it harder for them to vote like it's the 1950s because they're Democrats. Correct. And they're going to hide behind party affiliation. But what Roberts knows and what Alito knows and what every other conservative that is a voting rights expert and understands voting in this country gets is that you absolutely cannot separate race from politics, especially in the South. And we have several members in our delegation. We have Brandon Gill, who's a Republican from North Texas in a district that borders to mine. He's always doubling down on anti-Indian, anti-Pakistani. He made some comments the other day that said that he went into the mall outside of Dallas and it looked like it was, I think the term that he used was Islamabad or something like that. He's always doubling down on this stuff. Why? Because they know that sort of identity politics and those sort of racial politics sail, particularly in the South and in a place like Texas. And that's why you're hearing this rhetoric ramp back up. And so look at how far we've gone down.
Yeah, the change really can't be overstated. I mean, 1965, Congress finally passes the Voting Rights Act. And to your point, there are two major sections. Section 5 says, look, you cannot suppress voters. You can't make it harder for some people to vote. If you do, you have to come and deal with the attorney general. You have to come and get any change that could be conceived as hurting some voters. You got to get it approved. That was Section 5. Section 2 says when you are redistricting and you're creating congressional maps, you cannot dilute or undermine the votes of Black communities. And they gutted Section 5 in 2013. They've now gutted Section 2 in 2026. And that's why Kagan says that this latest chapter is the now completed demolition of the Voting Rights Act from the and from the Congressional Black Caucus. The ruling, quote, effectively signed the death certificate of the Voting Rights Act. It really is as bad as it gets. And this is another example of the extreme concentration of power and what it's done to our democracy.
Yeah.
And it is going to require us to lock in for years, if not decades, to get a new court and a new Congress and fix all this.
Yeah, it is. And it's sad. It really reminds you of the end of Reconstruction, when you had Reconstruction and it ended. Yeah. And then after that, you had Plessy versus Ferguson that solidified the end of Reconstruction.
Just so people, I think what you're getting at is in Reconstruction, there was all this progress, right? Including all kinds of progress at the ballot box.
Right.
You had several new Black senators and members of Congress.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it got torched.
Right, exactly. It got torched. And not only did that progress that was made in the country for what they would call freed men back then, not only did they get rid of Reconstruction, but they got rid of Plessy versus Ferguson that said that it was okay to discriminate in public accommodations when it relates to race. The Supreme Court said that was okay. A couple of decades later, I believe it was the Corrigan versus Buckley case that said that racial covenants were okay. So a lot of these older homes, when you go into these neighborhoods, you'll see it will say no Negroes, no Jews, no Slavs. Like they'll have no Spanish people. They'll have like all of these different racial covenant restrictions on these homes. And it was just like, since Reconstruction, all of these things were lost until you finally start winning them back again in the 1950s, 1960s, starting with Brown v. Board of Education. And now the Supreme Court is basically, with the progress that was made under the Civil Rights Act and the progress that was made on the Voting Rights Act, the Supreme Court has said, we're going to start systematically rolling those things back. And so we're back there again. We are literally back there again. And it makes me sick to my stomach that Roberts and Alito and Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett and Kavanaugh, that they are complicit in taking us back to a time and place to where Black people and Latino people in places like the South are going to have very little input. And I don't want to hear this crap about, well, we elected this Black Republican. That doesn't mean shit. And the reason why that doesn't mean shit is because a Black Republican in the South was elected almost all the time by a white constituency. For Black people to be able to have a voice in politics, particularly in the South, it is normally through single member districts, and single member districts for Black people and Latino people in the South are going to be greatly diminished. And that is our only voice, because we're not winning statewide. White people are picking conservatives to represent them statewide in these states. And and so the Black community already doesn't have a voice in places like Austin, Texas, in our state capital when it comes to statewide office holders. But where we do have a voice is in state legislators that take our voice and amplify it. Members of Congress that come to DC and amplify our voices. That is going to be severely, severely diminished. And it's a tragedy.
It is a tragedy, one we're going to have to fix.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just all going to have to dig in and appreciate that people before us, they put in a ton of work. They risked their lives, and we're going to have to do the same thing. So with that, thank you for joining us this week. Remember to rate and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're out of session next week. Although who knows, but we'll be back and soon enough. And thanks for watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy your May.